Hajime Nagumo starts off as loser and gets betrayed by his friends, but after eating monsters and teaming up with his hot vampire girlfriend, he becomes incredibly strong and defeats anyone who challenges him. This all begins when Nagumo wakes up alone deep in the Orcus Labyrinth. As he makes his way through, he encounters an Easter bunny who wants to eat his carrot. Before the bunny can take a bite, Bigfoot shows up and decides to have the rabbit for dinner. Realizing his next meal here, Nagumo tries to escape, but Bigfoot notices him and attacks, cutting off his arm. Nagumo then uses his only skill, transmute, to create a wall of rocks between them and escape. Due to blood loss, he passes out. When he wakes up, he sees a holy crystal and remembers reading about its healing properties. A week earlier, Nagumo and his classmates had prepared to enter the Great Orcus Labyrinth, led by Captain Meld. When they reached the 20th floor, Aminagawa, the leader of the class, told Nagumo there was no point in his miserable existence. After spotting a beautiful glance crystal, a classmate touched it and triggered a trap, transporting the class to the 65th floor, which was full of monsters. As the class tried to escape, Nagumo used his transmute skill to create a wall of rocks to slow the monsters down, allowing the others to get to safety. At this moment, Captain Meld organized the class to launch an attack on the monsters, creating cover for Nagumo to escape. However, one of the magic blasts hit him instead, blasting him right in front of the behemoth. The floor collapsed, plunging him into the monsters below. Seeing this, Kaori was devastated and remembered how only 9 days ago she had pleaded with him not to follow them into the labyrinth, fearing he'd get hurt. However, she promised to protect him. In the present, Nagumo makes up his mind to survive and defeat any enemy that stands in his way. Motivated by his craving for meat, he traps a couple of demon foxes in a hole using his transmute skill. After eating their meat, he undergoes a painful transformation, his hair turning white and his muscles growing bigger. When the pain stops, he notices his new appearance and checks his stats. He discovers that his level has increased, granting him new abilities, mana manipulation, mineral appraisal, iron stomach, and lightning field. Using his mineral appraisal and mana manipulation skills, he creates a powerful weapon and combines it with his lightning field to defeat the Easter bunny and eat its meat, gaining the abilities quick step and aerodynamics. Confident in his new powers, he hunts down Bigfoot, hoping to eat his meat this time. Bigfoot launches an attack, but Nagumo easily avoids it with quick step, jumps into the air, and fires his gun. However, he is knocked down by one of Bigfoot's attacks. However, Nagumo quickly throws a stun grenade, allowing him to shoot off Bigfoot's arm and eat it. Seeing this, Bigfoot charges at him, but Nagumo uses lightning field to deliver a finishing blow with a bullet to the head. Determined to survive the labyrinth and return home, he continues to eat Bigfoot, discovering that eating the same monster doesn't increase his stats but grants him a new ability, Spirit Claw. Unaware that he's back on the first floor, on the second floor, he faces another monster with petrification abilities and defeats it with his stun grenade and gun. Outside the labyrinth, the class reports to the king about their encounter with the behemoth on the 65th floor and informs him of Nagumo's loss. The king instructs them to keep this information to themselves. Later, Shizuku watches over Kaori, recalling how she stopped her from aiding Nagumo and allowed Captain Meld to knock her out. She goes outside to train and remembers how they got into this mess. In a flashback, when they arrived in Tortoise, the Pope told the class about a century-long war between humans and demons. The demons, having allied with the Beastmen, gained the upper hand. Desperate for help, the god of Tortoise summoned the class, asking them to help defeat the demons. Despite their teacher Eiko's objections, the classmates all agreed to help the kingdom. In the present, Shizuku suspects something is wrong when she hears Hiyama sneaking around behind her. She invites him to train with her, but he declines while acting shady after he leaves. Shizuku remembers that Hiyama always had issues with Nagumo and wonders if he might be responsible for the incident. However, she convinces herself that it can't be true and heads inside. When Kaori wakes up, Shizuku informs her that she has been asleep for 5 days. Kaori asks where Nagumo is, and Shizuku realizes that the group never went back for him. Meanwhile, in the labyrinth, Nagumo continues to survive, descending 50 levels until he reaches a large sealed door. Unable to figure out how to open it, he tries to use transmute, which triggers 2 Cyclops to awaken. Before they can fully wake up, he takes out one of them, leaving only one to deal with. Even though the monster uses defensive magic, he continues to shoot at it, backing it into a corner until he breaks through and defeats it. Meanwhile, in the kingdom, Kaori vows to become stronger so she can find Nagumo, asking Shizuku to help her. In the labyrinth, Nagumo searches among the monsters and finds mana stones that serve as keys to open the door. When the door opens, he sees a dark room with a strange magical design and a giant diamond at the end of it. He notices a girl trapped within the diamond and immediately turns back, sensing something suspicious. As he tries to leave, she tells him she was sealed there because she had been betrayed. He remains cautious and asks her for more information. She explains that she comes from a royal line of powerful vampires who locked her away for being too powerful. Convinced by her story, he decides to release her and asks for her name. When she says she wants him to name her, he names her Yu, which means moon. This makes her happy, and she tries to express her gratitude to him. But they are suddenly interrupted when Nagumo gets stabbed in the back. He quickly uses holy water to heal himself as Yu helps him remove the spikes. They turn around to see a giant crab monster blocking the entrance. Nagumo then gives Yu something to eat for energy while he battles the monster. However, he struggles to penetrate its hard shell. Seeing him struggle, Yu decides to help and uses her powers, and she is starting to suck his, his neck, casting Azure Blaze. After just one hit, she feels exhausted. He encourages her to try again, showing her the weak spot on the monster. Together, they finally manage to defeat the monster. Later, as Nagumo cooks some crab for himself, he tells Yu that vampires were destroyed 300 years ago and wonders how someone so old can look like a child. He then asks if she knows about the labyrinth. Yu explains that the labyrinths were built by mavericks who used them to escape the gods, and they might be able to escape if they find the maverick's lair. Happy to hear this, Nagumo shows her his improved weapon, which got stronger after using the crab's shell. Yu, surprised by its size, asks if he's even human. As they continue through the labyrinth together, Nagumo shares how his classmates betrayed him for being weak. Yu cries for him, but he assures her that he's over it and only wants to go home, inviting her to come with him. Meanwhile, Captain Meld tells Emanagawa that he has grown stronger and encourages the team to continue training. Back in the labyrinth, Nagumo and Yu accidentally stumble into an area filled with dinosaurs and figure that a monster must be controlling them with the flowers on their heads. As he searches for the monster behind the attack, Yu continues to feed on his neck, but he tells her he'd prefer if she did something else. They run into a cave alone and, as they look around, Nagumo notices some green balls coming toward them. He tries to block them with a wall, but suddenly Yu starts attacking him as a flower grows on her head. Suddenly, an ugly monster emerges and forces Yu to attack Nagumo until she finally lands a hit, causing a flower to grow on his head too. However, having built resistance from eating monsters, he's able to resist the mind control, shoots the flower off her head, and defeats the monster. Afterward, he eats the monster's meat and asks Yu if she would like a bite. She responds by saying she prefers to suck his dick and takes off her clothes. Later, after too much clapping, they continue to descend through the labyrinth, resting and mapping out the area until they reach the 100th level and find another massive door. Upon entering, they discover a giant room filled with glowing crystals, believing they've found the Maverick's slayer. However, a colorful Hydra emerges to stop them. The Hydra sends a fire blast at them, separating them, then fires a lightning attack at Nagumo, which he evades, countering with shots from his gun as Yu casts a glacial sheet to help. They soon realize that the Hydra's different heads have different abilities. The white head heals the rest of the body, so Yu tries to take it out with a crimson javelin, but the yellow head blocks the attack. Suddenly, the black head sends her into a trance and tries to attack, but Nagumo gets to her in time, jumping out of the way and leaving behind a stun grenade to slow the Hydra down. Meanwhile, Nagumo wakes Yu up, and she's relieved to see that he hasn't abandoned her. She touches him, which turned him on, causing him to kiss her. Struggling to keep his little PP in his pants, he tells her they need to defeat the Hydra before getting to second round. Yu then casts a combo attack on the Hydra, which tries to put her into a trance again, but she resists by thinking about how Nagumo is going to wreck her. Nagumo then launches his weapon, sending a huge blast at the Hydra, while Yu follows up with Heavenly Blaze, finally destroying the Hydra. Nagumo turns to see Yu exhausted from using too much magic. Suddenly, a bigger head rises behind him and blasts him. He takes the hit to protect her, and as he collapses from the blast, she drags him away, while the monster continues to rain powerful attacks at them. When she finally finds cover, she gives him holy water, but he doesn't wake up. She charges out with his gun to finish off the monster by herself but gets hit by one of its attacks. As it is about to finish her off, Nagumo moves to her rescue, much faster than before, telling her to suck his neck on him to get more energy. He faces the monster alone, evading its attacks and planting grenades above it, causing the ceiling to come crashing down on it. Using transmute, he bolts it down. Then Yu casts Azure Blaze, which finally defeats the monster, but she falls from exhaustion and rests with Nagumo. Meanwhile, the Pope talks to Eiko, who criticizes him for forcing the students to fight after losing a classmate and threatens to stop helping on the farms. Reluctantly, he agrees not to force anyone who doesn't wish to fight, and she storms off. Back in the labyrinth, the students return to the 60th floor for the first time since losing Nagumo. After encouraging Kaori, they decide to advance the next day. Nagumo wakes up in bed with Yu. Tell me in the comments, guys, how much rounds will be played by Nagumo on last night and when he asks how they got there. She tells him that she carried him inside the Maverick's Slayer, healed him with more holy water, and slept with him. They get dressed and explore the rest of the lair until they reach a room where they find the corpse of the Maverick. Nagumo steps on a magic circle that triggers a recording of the Maverick, Orcus. Orcus congratulates him on reaching the room and explains why he chose to fight against the gods of their world. Meanwhile, the rest of the class makes it to the 65th floor. Amanagawa and Shizuku begin to flirt, prompting Captain Mel to tell them to get a room. They reach a familiar spot and once again trigger the behemoth. Captain Mel instructs them to create an escape route, but this time the students are ready and charge at the monster. Amanagawa strikes first with his heavenly flash and gives everyone orders on how to proceed. Hercules uses his strength to hold the bull in place so Captain Mel can penetrate it with his sword, but he is unable to cut through. Shizuku sees how weak his thrust is and decides to show him how it's done, slicing off the bull's horn with one strike. Meanwhile, as Kaori supports the students with her halo magic, Amanagawa thrusts his weapon into the bull and gets kicked away. She casts a spell to protect him, and then all the students work together to defeat all the monsters. Back at the lair, Orcus informs Nagumo that he will give him his powers but requests that he doesn't use them for evil. Nagumo suddenly feels information rushing into his head and realizes the Mavericks were actually liberators, but he couldn't care less as he just wants to go home. He tells you that he's learned creation magic and can now make artifacts. They bury the corpse and head to the workshop, where they discover that the magic circle connects to the surface using Orcus Ring. They also discover a book that says conquering other labyrinths will grant them more ancient magic, which could teach them how to return home. So, they decide to stay in the lair and learn as much as they can. Later, Nagumo relaxes in the bath alone, but Yu joins him, telling him that he officially has an all-access pass to her full body and offers them to him. Over the following 2 months, he manages to practice creation magic, build a prosthetic arm, cover up his missing eye, and put a ring on her finger. When they are finally ready to go to the surface, he tells her he's likely to be targeted because of his power. They vow to protect each other and surpass the entire world. On the surface, a rabbit girl gets attacked by a monster as she waits for someone to rescue her. Just then, Nagumo and Yu appear, ready to continue their journey. She rushes to them, begging for help and offers Nagumo whatever he wants. Comment guys what you take from her. But Nagumo, irritated by her interruption, initially refuses. But when he sees her melons are bigger than Yu's, he is ready to help her. When the monster returns, Nagumo shoots it for daring to challenge him. Amazed by his strength, the girl introduces herself as she and begs him to save her family. Annoyed, he reluctantly agrees to hear her out but smacks her hard when she wipes her tears on him. She protests, saying hot girls like rough and tough men, but he retorts that she doesn't compare to Yu. She tries to entice him by pointing out that her melons are bigger than Yu's and offers them to him, but he turns away to avoid angering Yu, who is ready to send She to an early grave. After She survives Yu's wrath, she explains that she has been exiled from the Beastmen because she's the only one who can manipulate mana and even use magic to see possible futures. Nagumo, still indifferent, prepares to leave her behind by creating a power bike. However, Yu suggests they help She, as she can guide them to the Great Tree. They agree and head toward the Rabbitmen, using She as bait to distract the monsters while they help defeat them. After meeting with the other Beastmen and forcing them to accept She offers to join Nagumo and Yu on their journey. They decline, saying her uselessness would slow them down. The entire village begs Nagumo to help them become stronger, so he gets to work, with Yu sparring with She until she can land a hit. Later, Nagumo asks about She's progress, and Yu admits that She is freakishly strong. She then asks to accompany them, revealing that she's in love with Nagumo. Before Yu can react violently, other Rabbitmen report that they have destroyed the nearby monsters that threatened them, completing their transformation into a bloodthirsty village. The villagers then take Nagumo and Yu to the Great Tree, where they find a stone with a design similar to Orcus Labyrinth. They insert Orcus Ring, triggering a message that says the door will only open to those with 4 symbols, the power of regeneration and a beacon formed of bombs. Unable to open the door, they decide to clear the remaining 4 labyrinths and part ways with the villagers, but She insists on following them. She reminds Yu of their agreement, forcing Yu to ask Nagumo to let She come along. After the trio leaves the Sea of Trees, they head back into Ryan Gorge and use a map to try and find the entrance to the next labyrinth. However, She finds the entrance to the next labyrinth by dumb luck. They stumble upon a stone tablet that welcomes them to Mildy's labyrinth just as She falls through a trapdoor. Inside, Mildy taunts them through the stone tablet, prompting She to break it with her new hammer. Despite this, the taunting voice continues, making Mildy even more annoying than She. The group continues through the labyrinth, with She using her new weapon to smash through all the booby traps. Eventually, they realize they've been going in circles when they reach a familiar room. Back in the kingdom, Yuka tells her classmates, who refuse to return to the labyrinth, that she plans to join Eiko on her expedition. She feels compelled to do something to help and not just sit around. Meanwhile, inside Mildy's labyrinth, Nagumo, Yu, and She finally reach a large door, suspecting it will lead them to Mildy's lair. but they have to battle through an endless army of armored suits, shooting and smashing their way through until she smashes open a giant door. They jump into a room with floating boxes and come face to face with a giant armored suit that claims to be Mildy. Nagumo doubts this, stating that the real Mildy is dead according to Orcus. The armored giant insists she is Mildy and asks what they intend to do with ancient magic. Nagumo explains that he was forced into their world and seeks magic to return home. Mildy refuses to reveal if she has the magic he needs, prompting the group to attack, hoping to take out her core. They struggle to deal significant damage, and she counters by raining down millions of boxes on them. The girls hold on to Nagumo as he escapes and distracts her, while Yu sneaks behind and cuts through her armor. Mildy laughs, saying her armor can regenerate. Remaining focused, Nagumo knocks the armor down as Yu uses Freeze Coffin to keep it down. He drills a pin into her armor, which she hammers, causing the suit to break apart. Proud of Shi's progress, Yu asks her to bend over while she rubs her, but Mildy interrupts. Using the last of her power, she warns them about the bad guys they'll have to face, telling Nagumo that he'll become the god killer before she disappears. The group moves on to the next room, only to find another Mildy body that gives them gravitational magic and her ring. She tells them that only Yu is powerful enough to use it if she trains hard. Nagumo insists that Mildy must have more artifacts to give them and shakes her until all her treasures fall out. However, being the trickster she is, Mildy flushes the treasures away before they can gather any of them. As they continue, she sees a talking fish and passes out. Nagumo rescues her and gives her lips-to-lips CPR to revive her, but she wakes up and kisses him like she is sucking his but Nagumo is a Giga Chad, so he pushes her back, sending her to the moon with his rocket. Afterward, the trio heads to an inn, and Nagumo asks for a room for threesome. Sorry guys, I mean 3 of them to share. However, Yu suggests that she stay in a separate room so she and Nagumo can have some private time, but she protests, saying she wants to be with him too. The next day, the group meets with Chang, the head of an adventurers guild, who tells them he's been searching for them, hoping to get them to handle a mission. Nagumo initially refuses to hear him out, but Chang insists. Chang explains that the son of his friend, Count Cudetta, has gone missing along with his party of adventurers and needs to be rescued. He promises to pay them handsomely for their help. However, Nagumo still declines, so Chang offers to back the group if they ever get into trouble. After hearing this, Nagumo reconsiders and agrees to help on the condition that Chang makes them status plates and assists them in any way they ask. The group then heads toward the mountains, but Nagumo plans to stop in Adair to get some rice. Meanwhile, Eiko leads the farming team, including Yuka and the remaining hero rejects, to set up the rice farms. They rest for the day and eat while Eiko worries about Shimizu, who has been missing for a week. The owner of the inn informs Eiko that this would be their last meal because of trouble on the mountain, but mentions that they will soon receive guests who can help. Shortly after, Nagumo, Yu, and she walk in and sit at a table. Eiko recognizes Nagumo and rushes to their table to confirm if it's really him. She asks him why he looks like an anime main character and hasn't returned to his classmates, but he gives her evasive answers, which angers Prince Charming standing nearby. The prince storms over to their table, calling Nagumo rude and questioning why he would allow a filthy beastman to sit with him. Nagumo finally loses his temper when the prince threatens Yu, firing a warning shot at him. The other students can't believe their eyes and wonder how Nagumo became so aggressive, while Yuka remembers the time he saved her life in the labyrinth. After finishing his meal, Nagumo tells everyone to stay out of his way or he'll end them, then leaves with the girls. Eiko promises not to give up on him. Later, she gets a visit from him, and he explains why he isn't going back with her. He tells her that in ancient times there were constant wars between humans, demons, and beastmen fueled by their god. A group of liberators rose to stop him, but the god turned the people against them, earning them the title Mavericks. Because of this, the Mavericks built the labyrinth so that anyone who conquered them would gain the power to defeat the evil god. However, Nagumo says he has no intention of facing the evil god and is only clearing the labyrinths to find a way home. Just before he leaves, he tells her that one of the students intentionally shot at him and that she should warn Kaori and the rest to watch their backs. Later that night, Nagumo sets out with Yu and Shi, but finds Eiko and the other students blocking their way, insisting they come with them. After making a deal with Eiko to leave once she gets the information she wants, Nagumo creates a car for them to ride in and they head out together. On the way up the mountains, Eiko tells him that Shimizu has been missing, and he reassures her that he's probably fine as she falls asleep on his arm. Once they reach the mountain, he releases his human locating drones to search the area and they find some burnt remains of equipment left behind. The group heads to the area and quickly finds a giant crater with tracks left behind by a large creature. They continue to climb up the mountain until they reach a waterfall, where they sense the presence of a human. Yu creates a way through and they enter to find Will, who tells them he's the only survivor from a battle with a black dragon, feeling he's too ugly and useless to have been spared. Nagumo tells him to be happy he survived and to go on living in honor of the dead, while everyone wonders how he got so deep. On the way back, they hear a rumbling sound and the black dragon suddenly appears and blasts them. Nagumo, remembering this isn't the rising of the shield hero, blocks the attack with a shield. Yu casts Heavenly Calamity and she follows up with a hit from her hammer, but they are only able to stun the dragon. As it begins to attack again, it throws she into the sea. While they continue to attack, the dragon targets Will, offended by his ugly face, but Yu manages to protect him. Meanwhile, the other students try to help, but their attacks are too weak to make any impact. Nagumo tells Eiko to call back all the students and hide behind Yu while he deals with the dragon alone. He fires a gun that matches the power of the dragon and even overcomes it. When the dragon falls, he punches it in the gut and throws his stun grenades, but it fires a counterattack, which he evades, continuing to throw grenades at it as it loses energy. He then tosses the dragon in the air while summoning a tool to hold it down. However, the tool is ineffective as the dragon breaks free, attempting to attack Will again. She comes to the rescue and delivers the finishing blow, finally defeating the dragon. After defeating the dragon, Nagumo uses his tool to wake it up, causing it to respond and reveal it can talk. He pushes it in deeper, demanding to know if she is a dragonborn. She confirms, saying she will explain everything once he removes his tool. However, he drives it in deeper with each stroke, insisting she starts talking immediately. The dragon explains that she was mind-controlled by a mysterious man who sent her to eliminate Will and his friends. Nagumo remains skeptical until Yu confirms that dragonborns are proud and honest, suggesting she wouldn't lie. The Dragonborn pleads for her life long enough to stop the man who controlled her, claiming he's amassing an army of monsters. Nagumo still plans to kill her for taking innocent lives. However, Yu reminds him of his rule about not killing those who surrender. Reluctantly, he agrees to spare her, struggling to remove his tool as she makes happy noises, transforming fully into her human form. Who introduces herself as Tio. Tio then informs them that the army of monsters is heading toward Dur, which Nagumo confirms with his drones, reporting up to 60,000 monsters in sight. Will asks if Nagumo can take on the monsters, but he says his only job is to return Will safely. He asks who will inform the town. Tio, too exhausted to move, is dragged behind him, oddly pleased by this treatment. Back in town, Eiko pleads with Nagumo to help defeat the approaching army of monsters. He reluctantly agrees, helping the townspeople prepare and evacuate. Before leaving, he spots a mysterious man. Eiko asks him to return safely. As they wait for the monsters, Yuka approaches Nagumo to thank him for protecting her back in the labyrinth. He downplays his actions, telling her not to die. Tio then offers to join him on his journey, but he refuses, which only excites her more. She promises to show him her prowess in the upcoming battle, offering herself to him. When the monster army comes into view, Nagumo turns to the townspeople, assuring them they cannot lose with Eiko, the goddess of plenty, on their side. The townsfolk are inspired by his words, despite their likely ineffectiveness in the battle. Nagumo and she begin firing their weapons at the advancing army, while Yu and Tio cast powerful spells, taking out numerous monsters but barely making a dent in their numbers. As the monsters advance, Tio's ring breaks, and she falls asleep from exhaustion. Nagumo runs out of bullets and charges forward with she, aiming to find and stop the man controlling the monsters. They fight their way through the ranks, taking out enemies one by one, until they finally confront the masked man. Nagumo shoots the man's wolf before he can escape and carries him back to town. Eiko identifies the masked man as Shimizu, who reveals that he made a contract with the demons to attack Dur, hoping to gain praise from them for being the goddess of plenty. He didn't anticipate Nagumo's overwhelming power to wipe out an army of 60,000 monsters. As Eiko tries to reason with him, Shimizu suddenly grabs her and threatens to stab her with monster poison unless Nagumo hands over all his weapons. Nagumo refuses, and she jumps forward to save Eiko but gets hit by an attack from a distant monster. Nagumo rushes to give she holy water, but she urges him to attend to Eiko first. He kisses Eiko, giving her the holy water, leaving her with a lot to explain at their next meeting. When Eiko regains consciousness, she rushes to Shimizu's side, who is dying from his wounds. Shimizu pleads for medicine, swearing loyalty to Nagumo. However, Nagumo ends him with 2 bullets, stating he doesn't give second chances. On the way back, Will asks why Nagumo killed Shimizu, who is going to die anyway. Nagumo explains that he took the burden of Shimizu's death from Eiko so she could continue to be a good teacher. The next day, a couple of slavers find a mural child and plan to auction her off. Meanwhile, Nagumo returns Will to Chang, who fulfills his promise by giving them status plates. They lodge in a room with the girls, where Nagumo keeps watch, stating he'd end anyone who comes after them. Tio remembers her father's dying words to her as a child, that their enemy is the god of their world, and one day a being will come along with enough power to stop him. In the present, she convinces Nagumo to take her around town. They enter an aquarium where he meets a talking fish that he prefers over she. The fish tells them it was brought there against its will, so they set it free. Before leaving, the fish tells them about the mural girl who was brought in with it. They head back into town, sensing a weak presence coming from below. Meanwhile, at the market, Yu tells Tio she's comfortable with a three-way because she is submissive. At the same time, Nagumo and she find the mural child near the sewers and take her back to town. She wakes up, introduces herself as Mei, and tells them she was separated from her parents and taken by slavers who want to auction her off. Nagumo plans to leave her with the city guards, but she begs to stay with them, only to be handed over despite her crying. As they leave, they hear an explosion and head back to find that Mei was taken by the slavers, who left a message for Nagumo to give up she to keep the child safe. This excites Nagumo as he finally has someone to shoot. He finds Yu and Tio, explains the situation, and they split up to search for Mei, taking out all the slaver gangs in town and freeing other stolen children. Nagumo eventually finds Mei at the auction house, frees her, and takes her to a good vantage point as they destroy all the slavers' hideouts. After introducing her to Yu and Tio, Mei decides to make Nagumo her papa. Later, the group heads back to Daron. They meet Kilo, who finds it hard to believe the report of their time. Suddenly, Endou, his former classmate, bursts into the room to report that a demon is in the labyrinth and quickly recognizes Nagumo, asking for his help. Just before this, the classmates had finally reached the 90th floor when they encountered a demon who told them to join her. When they refused, she released invisible monsters on them, attacking Shizuku and Suzu. Kaori quickly cast a healing spell that also revealed the monsters. They rushed to attack but were overpowered, as the demon healed the monsters instantly. Shizu told Endo to sneak out and report to Captain Mel that they needed help. The demon asked Yamanagawa to join her once more, but he refused and finally defeated a monster. However, the demon cast a cloud of smoke to end them, and Suzu cast a barrier spell to protect them but was stabbed by a monster that appeared within the barrier. As the barrier broke, the smoke cloud advanced and turned Suzu's legs to stone. Yamanagawa blasted it away before it could reach the others. Devastated by Suzu's loss, he dropped to his knees. When Shizuku told him to get up, he asked how they could run when the demon ended their friend, so she slapped him as an answer. At the same time, Endo reached Captain Meld on the 7th floor and explained the situation, but they were attacked by a monster that followed him back. The captain sent Endo to warn the others above about the demon, bringing him to the present with Nagumo and his party. Meanwhile, back in the labyrinth, the classmates managed to escape from the demon, but Hiyama suggested that they surrender, with Araki seconding the motion, saying they'd die if they kept running. Suddenly, they see a bloody Captain Meld, who tells them to do whatever it takes to survive as the demon appears and finishes him off. This enraged Yamanagawa, who prepares to use his ultimate move again. He manages to cut through the monsters and deal the demon significant damage but can't bring himself to end her. She takes advantage of his hesitation and summons a monster, sending him flying. On the surface, Endo begs Nagumo to save his classmates, and as he hesitates, he remembers his time with Kaori, Yuka, and Eiko and makes up his mind. Back in the labyrinth, Kaori runs out of mana as she tries to save the captain, and Shizuku does all she can to hold the monsters back but is tossed aside like a ragdoll. Kaori rushes to her side, protected by Suzu, who is somehow still alive, but the monsters break through the barrier. They prepare for the worst when suddenly, a large tool penetrates the monsters and ends them as Nagumo appears in a badass entrance. The students are shocked to see him. The rest of his party appears, and he instructs them to protect his classmates and deal with the monsters while he faces the demon, giving her a chance to run away. But she tells him that he has walked into hell. After declaring her his enemy, he grabs one of the monsters from thin air, throws it across the room, and begins to shoot all the monsters she throws at him. His classmates watch with their jaws on the floor as he jumps in the air, throws his grenades, followed by a shower of gunfire that ends the monsters instantly. Then, a giant ninja turtle sends off powerful energy blasts his way, but he uses his shield to reflect it at the demon. He continues on his bloodthirsty rampage. Yamanagawa asks Endo who the badass is, and he reveals that it's actually Nagumo, causing Hiyama to piss himself as he remembers that he shot the rogue attack on him. He struggles to believe it's really him, and Yu tells him to shut the fuck up and let Nagumo cook. Suddenly, some monsters try to attack the students, but Yu used Stark Firmament to trap them in a dark ball. Then, she joined the fight and smashed the monsters to dust. Next, Tia destroyed her share of monsters, causing the demon to send Baltimore's snake after Shizuku and Kaori. Nagumo tossed Shizuku a sword, which she used to defeat the snake. The demon then used her ultimate move, sending a dark cloud towards him, making everyone think he was doomed. In response, Miu called out for her papa, which sent Kaori into a rage. However, he emerges unscathed and questions her about the source of her power. He figures out that someone else gained ancient magic from a labyrinth and gave it to her. As she accepts her fate, she warns him that her lover will come for revenge, but he promises to send her lover to join her. Catalia pleads for him to spare her life, but he kills her without a second thought, causing Hiyama to wet himself. Afterward, she reports that she's been able to heal Captain Meld. Yu rushes to Nagumo's side to further the plot. The other classmates approach. Kaori thanks him for saving them and apologizes for breaking her promise as she embraces him, enraging Yu and Shi, who already struggle to share him. As they leave the labyrinth, a man named Gawa questions him, saying he didn't have to kill the demon. Nagumo replies that he's not weak like him and takes care of his business. He then explains that he only helped them because he owed Kaori, causing Yu to give her a death stare. On the surface, Kaori tells him she loves him and wants to stay by his side, even if it's as a side piece. So Yu asks him to allow her, intending to put Kaori in her place. Kaori accepts the challenge, believing she can win him over from an old hack. Nagumo and the others leave, telling Kaori they'll be setting out the next day. Later that night, they all relax as Amanagawa tries to stop Kaori from going, but Shizuku tells him to sit down and leave her alone. The next day, Kaori says her goodbyes and joins Nagumo's group as they ride off. Back in the kingdom, Isar tells the king about the hero's return and the recent activities involving the demons. Princess Liliana looks worried, but soon a servant announces their arrival. She rushes to welcome them and is overjoyed to see Shizuku and the other classmates. Liliana is informed that the hero rejects have been training hard since the others went down into the labyrinth. When she asks where Kaori is, Shizuku tells her that Kaori was won over by Nagumo's impressive abilities, which is why Amanagawa has been sulking like a sore loser. Liliana wishes she could see it for herself, but Shizuku says Nagumo already has enough admirers. Meanwhile, Nagumo and his crew ride through the desert while Kaori and Yu argue about who he prefers. Yu wins completely when she mentions her superior skills. Suddenly, Tio points out giant sandworms ahead but notes that it's strange they seem to hesitate to attack. However, one of the worms appears in front of them, and the horde begins to attack. During the commotion, Kaori tries to get Nagumo's attention, but they tie her up so Nagumo can fight. He brings out his powerful weapons and fires multiple rounds, clearing the way. They then see a man lying in the middle of the road. Kaori, being a priest, checks on him and discovers he has mana overload, which is harming him from the inside. She casts a spell to reduce the excess mana, though she warns it's only a temporary fix. The man wakes up and, seeing Kaori, thinks he's in heaven. But Nagumo steps on him and tells him to get his own girl. Back in the truck, the man introduces himself as Biz, son of the Duke of Anagi. He explains that his people have been collapsing from a strange fever and that a poison-causing mana overload is in their water. After hearing about the town's plight, Nagumo agrees to help them find a cure from the Giran volcano. Meanwhile, in the kingdom of Garland, Freddy tells his subordinate Michael that their last mission failed. Due to the presence of an irregular who wiped out their entire army, Freddy plans to head to the volcano himself to acquire the power of a god in service to their king. After leaving Michael in charge, he sets off to find the irregulars and make them pay for disrupting their plans. When the group arrives at Annie, they meet with the Duke, who asks for their help. She and Kaori start attending to the sick while the rest head outside. Yu uses her azure magic to dig into the ground, and Nagumo lines the bottom of the hole. Yu then uses her tidal wave magic to create a lake, providing water for them in the meantime. Exhausted from using so much magic, Yu turns to her snack and takes a bite, making sure to get some action in the process while Tio and Mu watch. The townsfolk show them to the oasis, and Nagumo, using his demonic eye, suspects something is amiss. He asks the Duke if they use any artifacts at the bottom of the oasis, but the Duke says all the artifacts are on the outside. Nagumo steps forward and throws several grenades into the water, causing large tentacles to emerge and attack. He shoots them down while Yu and Tio handle the others, revealing a jelly-like monster with a mana crystal inside. Nagumo shoots at the crystal, destroying the monster. When they check the water, it's still polluted. Tio assures them that since the fresh water flows out constantly, it will eventually return to its original state. The Duke asks what could have been responsible for the monster living there, so Nagumo tells him it was probably the demons, which surprises the Duke. He thanks them for their help. They head back to town, and the Duke tells the people not to give up since they now have clean water. Nagumo and his team have accepted the quest to mine stillstone from the Grand Groom volcano. Kaori offers to stay and look after the patients along with Mew, so he thanks her. When Mew asks if he's going to give her something like he did with Yu, it triggers Kaori, who turns into the FBI with all her questions. Afterward, they head through the desert and arrive at the volcano. As they go up, the heat starts to get to everyone except Tio, who is used to enjoying pain.
What do you mean by that?
Inside, they see that most of the stillstone has already been mined, so they decide to go deeper to get the quantity they need. As they continue, a fire blast heads toward them. Yu uses her spatial severance magic to swallow it. When they see the fiery bolts left behind, Nagumo asks if it would like to taste his tool, but she says she'd handle it instead and hits it with her large hammer. They discover a bright room lined with all the stillstone they need, so they decide to clear the labyrinth before mining it. As they head deeper, the girls get so hot that Yu starts sounding dumber than she, and even Tio says they need to rest. Nagumo uses his transmute skill to make a room, and Yu uses her ice magic to help them cool off. Tio suggests that if the Orcus Labyrinth was meant to train them to fight several monsters and gain experience, and the Rizz Labyrinth tested their ability to respond to different types of attacks, then the Grun Volcano might test how to respond to ambushes and surprise attacks. He wonders if the tests are actually teaching from the Liberators, but loses focus when he sees Tio's curves, although he remains loyal to his Flat Queen. Later, they ride on a lava lake until they arrive at a dome with 100 gems lining the walls and wonder if they accidentally pass the Guardians. Suddenly, a fireball hurls toward them. Tio counters with her fire blast, but it starts raining fireballs, so they split up to get to safety. Yu covers Nagumo as he heads toward the island, but a lava serpent suddenly emerges. When he shoots it down, 3 more appear, causing him to retreat and regroup. He suspects they're similar to the monster back in Annie, with mana crystals located inside them. When his demon eye is unable to locate them, he brings out a powerful gun and takes one down fast enough to reveal the crystal and crush it. The girls join in, and they take out all the serpents. However, when they respawn, she points out that the same number of snakes they defeated are now broken on the dome. The team realizes they have to defeat all 100 snakes and gets to work. Tio suggests that whoever takes out the most snakes gets a reward from Nagumo. But when Yu and she are about to cook, they know they stand no chance. After Nagumo takes out the last snake, a massive energy beam comes crashing down on him, leaving him badly injured. Yu uses her magic to catch him and carry him to safety, giving him some holy water, though he remains unresponsive. Suddenly, Tio tells her to look out and casts a barrier spell to shield them from a mysterious attack. Yu also casts a barrier spell to protect them as the attacks destroy the surrounding area. Suddenly, Freddy appears with a horde of dragons, saying the ambush was a success. He wonders how Nagumo survived a direct hit from one of his dragons and asks how much ancient magic he's been able to learn. Nagumo manages to get up and asks, "Did you who am I?" So, Freddy says he's God's apostle, planning to bring divine punishment to Nagumo. Fuma declares him as his enemy and decides to show him his boss. However, all their attacks are repelled by a magic shield. Freddy uses his magic, Cosmic Rift, to teleport behind Nagumo and sends another powerful blast at him, which Nagumo barely manages to guard against. The girls defend against other attacks while Tio remembers her father's last words for her to show her true self when the right time comes. Nagumo uses his limit break technique to break away from the attack and his cross shields to protect him, moving closer to Freddy. Freddy tries to attack, but he's knocked away by Tio in her true black dragon form, which he thought was all wiped out. The two dragons use their dragon breath on each other, resulting in an intense battle to see who's stronger. When Freddy tries to interfere, Nagumo finally reaches him, fires a gun that can penetrate his shield, and then launches forward to attack, sending him flying off the dragon. Tio is able to overwhelm the white dragon, but it flies back and rejoins Freddy. Nagumo's technique runs out of time, returning him to his badly injured state and causing him to fall toward the lava until Tio swoops in and saves him. Freddy gives him props for being able to hold his own even after being ambushed, and says the sacrifice he's about to make is worth it to defeat someone this opus. Just as Nagumo asks what he's talking about, the lava begins to rise. Freddy tells them he destroyed the cornerstone that was keeping the volcano inactive. Nagumo then tells Tio to take his ring and escape through the roof, since she's the only one who can make it through all the obstacles, and sends word to Annie, assuring her that he will keep his promise to the town and beat Freddy one day. Tio flies up to escape, but she gets attacked by the dragon horde. Yu uses her magic to absorb some of the attacks away from her, while the pain she receives helps to boost her stats, allowing her to break free. Meanwhile, Princess Liliana walks through the palace, remembering how she tried to call out to her father, but he and his men looked like something was seriously wrong. She then finds Shizuku training and interrupts to tell her that the castle officials and church have decided that Liliana needs to get much stronger to fight the demons. While Nagumo might be branded a heretic in the forest, Liliana laments how Nagumo could possibly be alive when a familiar voice calls out to her. She tells him there's no longer any reason to obey her since Nagumo is still alive. The mysterious lady continues to assure him that he can still get Kaori back from Nagumo as long as they make a trade. Later, Tio arrives at the gates of Annie and transforms back to her human form. Kaori runs up to attend to her and asks why she's the only one there. As Tio gets some rest, she brings Kaori up to speed on what happened. They remain confident they'll see Nagumo again and decide to take care of Arisen to reunite with her mother. Some days later, Nagumo floats on a ship in the middle of nowhere. Yu asks him how he's doing, and he says the poison from the burning light is almost gone. She decides he's healthy enough to ride. As things get steamy, he remembers how they narrowly escaped from the lava and were saved when a large door opened up for them. There, they stood in a magic circle and received magic that controlled space, along with a message from Grun, hoping the future of mankind would be based on free will. Yu grabs the proof of conquest he left behind but says they wouldn't be able to use spatial magic yet since it's hard to master. Nagumo tells them he made a ship that can swim through lava. Yu uses her barrier magic to get them into it, and they manage to make it out. They get attacked by sea creatures, and when they run out of ammo, Yu uses her magic to destroy them. This makes her weak, and she's unable to help Nagumo since he's in rough shape. I did not know guys what they are doing here, and she says she can take over as their snack in the meantime. Back in the present, Yu had some rest from that exhausting ride, and she joins them. They all find food to eat while they wonder where they have washed up. Suddenly, some merfolk emerge, and a man begins to question them. Nagumo smacks him aside with a fish. Then, they suddenly see Miu falling from the sky with Tio and Kaori beside her, so he jumps up to catch her and the group officially reunites. Afterward, they sail to Arisen, and Miu finally gets reunited with her mother, Ramiya. When she sees her mother's injured leg, she assures her that her papa will help her and turns to Nagumo. The other mermen argue over who Miu's papa is and figure Ramiya must belong to the streets. They head inside, and Kaori begins to heal her, but she says it would take a few more days to do it properly. Ramiya thanks them for all their help and asks why Miu calls him papa. He explains the story, and she tells them they are welcome to stay in her house while they're in town, especially for Miu's sake, even offering to make him Miu's real papa if he's interested. However, he tells her he doesn't do single moms. Back in the kingdom, Shizuku stumbles into Eiko, and they catch up on what's been going on. Shizuku asks how she managed to recover from almost dying, but Eiko starts acting suspiciously. Shizuku suspects that Nagumo saved her as well. Eiko confirms that Nagumo has been branded a heretic despite her objections and his actions. She suspects something fishy might be going on and mentions that all the officials seemed off. She tells Shizuku that she needs to speak to the whole class about something important Nagumo told her. Some days later, they leave Arisen for the ruins of the Mailing Labyrinth. Nagumo spends night and day searching for it. One day, Kaori tries to get some alone time with him as they enjoy a beautiful sunset, but Yu appears, not willing to let her man slip through her fingers. The other girls join them later. He then gets an idea and holds the proof of conquest from the previous labyrinth up, which fills with moonlight and creates a beam of light that points the way. They head into the ship and follow the ray of light until a wall opens up and sucks them into it, causing them to lose their balance for a bit. When the ship stabilizes, he notices a red and black magic power, so he launches his new weapons at it. They appear to be effective, allowing them to continue until they reach another magic circle. There, he holds up the artifact, and it unlocks the gate into an area that finally isn't covered with water. They get off the ship, head inside, and face a couple of monsters, which he says are all embarrassingly weak for labyrinth standards. However, he eats those words when they come across a purple gooey monster that Shi's smash has no effect on. Yu sets up a barrier spell, and Tio tries her fire magic, but Yu points out that the jelly seems to melt magic. Just as the jelly starts to take shape, Nagumo and Shi shoot at it, but their attacks have no effect on it. Kaori takes over shield duty, and Yu and Tio join in to attack, but nothing works and it continues to surround them. He notices a space in the ground and makes it wider, so they manage to escape underwater. The current pulls them in separate directions, and when he has to choose between Yu and Kaori, he picks the one with the larger rack. Later, they arrive at a beach alone. When Kaori asks Nagumo why he chose her, he explains that Yu can take care of herself, unlike her. He adds that since Yu is so powerful, he chose to save Kaori instead. This makes Kaori jealous of how much he trusts Yu, but Nagumo tells her to suck it up and remember that they are still inside a labyrinth. They continue walking forward until they reach a creepy warship wreckage and suddenly find themselves in an illusion resembling the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. Nagumo figures out that the illusions can be stopped by attacks infused with magic, and they manage to fend off the attacks. However, they soon find themselves surrounded by the crew, who declare they will defeat them for their god. They jump up and try to figure out what to do, and Kaori suggests that defeating all the ships might end the war. Nagumo gets down to business, and after they succeed, she asks what that was about. He theorizes that it was probably a recreation of a war that happened in the past and that the labyrinth's concept might be to show the tragedy a crazed god can bring about. When Kaori thinks about all the lives lost, she gets sick and apologizes for her reaction, but Nagumo says he's not bothered since he's been to hell and back but was able to make it through thanks to Yu. This makes Kaori jealous again, so he reminds her that he loves Yu and if that bothers her, then she shouldn't be around him. Meanwhile, in the kingdom, Eiko is on her way to meet with the students when a woman in a nun outfit stops her and tries to brainwash her into going to Divine Mountain. When Eiko resists, the woman resorts to a gut punch and tells her she won't enter but needs her as a useful pawn. Liliana, who is nearby, overhears everything. Back in the labyrinth, Nagumo tells Kaori she needs to decide why she followed him and that it's a good idea to stay focused. They then head to another ship, and when they hop on board, another illusion begins. They see a party with humans, demons, and beastmen getting along. The king appears and makes a speech about the success of their peace treaty, adding another layer to the labyrinth's mysteries and challenges. However, the king suddenly switches up and tells the guests that they can never be on equal footing with humans. He then leads an ambush in the name of their god, slaughtering all the guests while he goes inside, followed by a mysterious masked woman. The illusion ends, and Kaori wonders why it ended before they did anything. Nagumo suggests that the point might be to get them to look around. As they search inside the ship, he comments that the king's actions seem strange and that he shouldn't have been able to gather that much respect if he was truly hiding such hatred for the other races. Suddenly, a strange mist appears, and Nagumo catches a string that triggers some booby traps, which he destroys instantly. However, Kaori gets blown away by a strong wind, leaving him in the middle of an ambush. After showing his prowess, he turns back to look for Kaori. When he finds her, he puts a gun to her head and shoots. She comes to and asks why he did that, but he tells her to cut the crap since he can tell her body has been taken over. The entity possessing Kaori asks him how he can hurt someone he cares about, but he says the magic ammunition only hurts the thing possessing her and fires another shot. He tells the entity that if it stays, he'll continue to show it hell without letting it die. Seeing the murderous aura around him, the entity finally gives up and disappears. Nagumo leans in close to make sure Kaori is okay. When she comes to, she plants a kiss on him and tells him that she's decided to stay with him, even if she'll always be inferior to you, making her the ultimate supporter. Afterward, they reach the end of the dungeon, and Nagumo says that was a piece of cake compared to the other labyrinths. Kaori reminds him that it would have been tough for the people of this world with strong faith to witness all the god-caused chaos. The rest of the team shows up, and Tio teases him about his alone time with Kaori, making him smack her until her buns become steamy. Kaori brags about the kiss she shared with Nagumo, telling Yu that she's not backing down. Yu welcomes the challenge. They step into the magic circle and gain the power of restoration along with the proof of conquest. However, the water suddenly starts rising, so Yu uses spatial magic to transport them. They end up surrounded by water again as the jelly monster reappears and attacks. While Yu holds it off, Nagumo begins to create a new weapon to defeat it. Before he can finish, the monster tries to swallow them whole, making them think they are goners. Suddenly, a swarm of fish holds it back, and the fish god tells him he came to help. Thanks to the extra time, Nagumo finishes up and launches the missiles, which finally defeat the monster and cause a huge explosion. Back in the kingdom, the students discuss how strange it is that Eiko isn't back from Divine Mountain, and Shizuku notes that Lily isn't back either. Captain Meld shows up, and they air their concerns about Eiko and several other students who have gone missing. He tells them they're also investigating the case. Meanwhile, at Divine Mountain, Eiko is held captive while the nun says she has become an inconvenience to her lord's game. Some days later in Arisen, Mew wakes Nagumo up and asks why he and Yu are always naked. When Yu tells her she'll understand when she grows up, Mew points out Nagumo's special growth and asks whether that's why he understands. He grabs her and tries to explain when the girls walk in just in time and tell them breakfast is ready. While they eat, Nagumo thinks about how they'll have to leave soon but doesn't know how to break it to Mew. They head out for a fun day by the water, and the girls play tag with her while he sits alone, still trying to figure out what to do. During the game, Mew jumps in the water and uses a big splash to steal Shi's bikini top, leaving her exposed. Ramiya swims up to Nagumo and thanks him for trying to keep Mew happy but tells him that he should do what he needs to do since Mew has grown so much and can handle it. He agrees and plans to tell her they're leaving the next day. Ramiya says they'll make a feast that night, then she moves between his legs and calls him darling. Like clockwork, Yu appears ready to cook a fish, and Kaori laments how she can't catch a break. Mew asks Nagumo if he wants Shi's bikini top, which makes Shi think Nagumo put her up to it. Yu offers him hers, and the other girls follow suit until he's covered in every possible piece of swimwear available there. Later, Nagumo finally breaks the news to Mew, who tells him that one day she'll find him. He promises to come back for her once everything is over and show her where he grew up. That evening, the girls are surprised at his decision to take her to Japan with them. He says that even if he isn't able to take her back before they go, he'll do whatever it takes to cross back until he's able to make it happen. The next morning, Mew hands them identical charms to send them off, and they all say their goodbyes and leave Arisen. Back in the kingdom, Lily runs around the alleyways, remembering what she saw the other day and wondering who she can possibly trust. Meanwhile, a brainwashed army is addressed by a hidden woman saying the time has come, with Hiyama standing nearby. Eiko demands to know what they plan to do to her students while she's locked up, but the nun walks off, so Eiko places her hope in Nagumo. At the same time, Fried says the Demon Lord has issued his decree, so he leads his forces forward to attack the humans of the north. Meanwhile, Captain Meld ponders over the void that seems to be taking over all the magic knights and soldiers. Josie approaches him to give a report that 30% of their forces seem to be affected, but he wonders if it's really an attack or just them being unfocused. Meld tells him to be on guard so he doesn't get affected too, and comments that the king doesn't seem to be affected and is rather excited to deal with the demons. He sends Josie off to gather anyone with knowledge of dark magic to investigate the void and deal with it. Later, as Captain Meld sits in his office, he wonders why he hasn't been targeted if this is really an attack on the palace. Preparing letters for the Duke of Ani and Nagumo should anything happen to him, he suddenly hears a knock. Hiyama says he has something important to tell him, so Meld lets him in and asks what's wrong. Hiyama just sits there quietly until they hear another knock on the door. It's Josie with another report. However, when he opens the door, Josie immediately tries to attack, clearly taken over by the void. Meld manages to evade Josie's attacks and notices Hiyama starting to move toward him to attack. Meld jumps in front of Hiyama to hold Josie off, but suddenly gets stabbed in the back by Hiyama. Using a wind spell, Meld blows them all across the room. When he heads toward Hiyama, 2 more magic knights come to Hiyama's aid and charge at Meld. Despite being outnumbered, Meld takes them all out, showing that Nagumo isn't the only bad. He then crosses swords with Josie, disappointed that his comrade got taken over, but knocks him flat on his ass. Hiyama is surprised to see Captain Meld has been useful all this time, but the fallen soldiers rise up again, and he says even death can't stop them. As more knights come in and surround him, Meld decides to jump out of the window to escape. However, he comes face to face with an angel. When she stretches out her hand, everything goes white. Afterward, the mystery woman picks up the letters Meld left behind and asks Hiyama where the angel went. He tells her the angel left, saying they were half-baked. She says it was all part of her plan and that this proves she has the blessing of God. The next day, as Nagumo drives through the area, he sees bandits surrounding some people within a barrier spell. When the barrier starts to disintegrate, Kaori begs him to help them. Nagumo steps on the gas and brings out his weapons to take out the bandits. When they arrive, Kaori rushes to heal the injured while Nagumo continues to take out the bandits. Suddenly, Liliana runs up to Kaori, and she's happy to see her. As they catch up, Nagumo walks up to them, and Liliana is glad she finally got to see him. Nagumo doesn't even recognize who Liliana is, so Kaori tells him she's the princess. Liliana then rides in the van with them and tells Nagumo about the brainwashing at the palace and Eiko's kidnapping. Liliana explains that she was hoping to find help and had boarded a caravan to go see the Duke to send for help, but she was happy to run into them. Nagumo says they first have to rescue Eiko and points south, noting that Divine Mountain is also a labyrinth. He wonders what kind of ancient magic he can get there. Meanwhile, in her cell, Eiko wonders what they are plotting against her. She figures it might be Nagumo, just as he appears outside her window and busts in. When he tells her he came to rescue her, she gets flustered. Then he leans in and grabs her, but when she reminds him they can't because she's his teacher, he tells her he was just trying to remove the chains and that she should get her mind out of the gutter. She asks him how he knew where she was, and he tells her about what Liliana saw, showing her that he cared that much. Eiko thanks him for saving her back in Arison, but warns him to be careful now that he's been branded a heretic. Suddenly, they hear a sound, and Nagumo gets word that the demons are attacking. He tells Eiko to meet up with the rest of the group. However, a bright light suddenly appears, and they see that the mountaintop has been completely disintegrated by an angel who calls herself Nin, claiming she's God's apostle. The rest of the gang heads toward Shizuku's room when the windows suddenly break apart. Lily sees that the Great Barrier has been destroyed, leaving the kingdom vulnerable. Then, Tio radios in and tells them that the demons have invaded the kingdom and the White Dragon's breath broke the barrier. Yu suggests that they split up, with Kaori and Lily going to find the students while she and Shia go to make Fred pay for hurting Nagumo. They leave and meet up with Tio at the bell tower and ask where Fred is, but Nagumo radios in and tells Tio he needs her to take Eiko to safety immediately. Tio flies off, carrying Eiko to safety. Suddenly, Shia gets a premonition and warns Yu just as an attack incinerates the bell tower. They escape in time, and Fred shows up with his forces. He sends another dragon blast their way, but Yu uses spatial magic to send it back, incinerating half his forces. She signals for him to bring it on. Because of this, Fred tells his forces to split up, with Michael facing Shia and him focusing on Yu so they can't collaborate. Michael attacks Shia, and they end up transported to a separate location. He tells her that he intends to avenge his betrothed, who they defeated in the Orcus Labyrinth, but Shia tells him she doesn't really care and that no one should be fighting if they don't want to die. This enrages him, so he rains down energy blasts at her. She evades them easily and whacks him with her hammer, warning his forces not to attack at close range. This makes her summon Miley's wrecking ball and begin to knock them out. They pierce her with stone needles, and just as she begins to petrify, she uses her quasi-restoration magic to return to normal. She then wraps around him with her chain and smashes him into the ground, ending the one-sided beating. Back on Yu's end, Fred attacks with a volley of fire, but she absorbs them with her magic and then summons a lightning dragon. However, it gets absorbed by another ninja turtle. Fred tells her that as long as he has turtle power, her magic will be nullified. Yu, unfazed, summons 5 lightning dragons which incinerate the turtle along with half his forces. Fred casts a spell that acts like an atomic bomb, wiping everything out except Yu. However, when she's distracted, his dragon stabs her. She laughs and shifts into her demon form, casting a revival reversal spell to heal the wound Nagumo caused in the labyrinth. This leaves him significantly weakened, so his men provide cover as he escapes using spatial magic. Shia arrives and inquires about the situation, but she informs Shia that he has managed to escape. Meanwhile, continues to attack Nagumo, who stays on the defensive since he's carrying Eiko. She charges in with her sword, blocking his shots and swings at him. He evades and attacks with his cross shields. She commends him for being able to defend himself with the dead weight and acknowledges him as too strong, but says that's why he's not fit to be a pawn for their god. Then she fires a magic blast at him, but he uses his tools to create a barrier that protects them. Soon, he starts to hear chanting from the church, which generates magic that weakens others. Nagumo asks her why she's focusing on him instead of defeating the demons who could destroy the kingdom. When she says, so be it, he points out that Eiko is just using the humans as pawns and might even be the same god backing the demons. She doesn't seem bothered by this, so he asks why they don't just send him to his world if he's in their way. She says that Eiko would prefer for him to die on his way to reaching his goals for his entertainment. She then sends another powerful attack, which finally shatters the barrier, but Tio arrives just in time and blasts her away. Nagumo hands Eiko to her, and she carries her to safety. On the way, Tio tells her that she has to deal with the church and needs to drop Eiko off, but Eiko offers to help, revealing that her magic is actually on par with the Maneggo's, and she'd like to help. Meanwhile, Nao continues to give Nagumo a hard time as he notices her magic power doesn't seem to be decreasing, even though his limit break technique has a time limit. He continues to attack with all he's got and draws in for a close range attack, but only manages to put a few scratches on her while he's badly injured and exhausted. However, he pulls out 2 spatial rings and uses them to transport his attacks at her, which finally break apart her swords. Then he holds her in place while he powers up his ultimate tool, which no one has been able to survive, and tries to force it into her. Though she tries to resist, he finally gets it in and defeats her. After he hears an explosion, he rushes to find out the cause, but when he gets there, he sees Tio and Eiko have accidentally blown up the entire church, ending everyone on site instantly. When Eiko realizes what she's done, she struggles to come to terms with it, and he comforts her. Tio soon points out the presence of a glowing man who's trying to get their attention. They follow him, and he leads them to a magic circle, making Nagumo wonder if this is also a labyrinth. They get transported to another room where they receive magic that can manipulate a person's soul, which he figures is the same kind Miu used to keep her soul in a golem. He walks forward and reads that the requirement to defeat the labyrinth was to defeat 2 other labyrinths, have absolutely no faith in the god, and defeat an effect powered by God. So he grabs the ring, and Eiko reminds him that they have to go help out since the capital is under attack. At the same time, Shizuku hears a strange noise and gets out of bed to check what it is. She sees some other students out of bed, and they wake everyone up to investigate. Suddenly, Nia runs up and informs them that the demons are invading. So, Amanagawa suggests that they buy time for the people to evacuate, but Iri suggests that they meet up with the rest of the Magic Knights first, and Suzu and Shizuku agree. Miu leads them to where the Magic Knights are gathered, but the students can tell that something's off. Hosei addresses the knights and brings out an orb to signal the beginning of the war. When he activates it, it creates a blinding light that blinds the students while the knights attack, leaving only Shizuku standing. The mystery woman appears and says she isn't surprised that she'd be left standing. Just as Neo runs up to her asking for help, she embraces her and Neo stabs her in the back. The mystery woman turns out to be Iri. After the students are tied up, Iri chains up Manoa and kisses him, revealing that she's so down bad for him that this entire plot has been to make him hers. Shizu asks what she did to the others, and she tells them they're all dead, and she used a special type of necromancy to bind their souls to hers. They refuse to believe she'd do such a thing, so she uses a classmate to demonstrate and brings him back right in front of them. Suzu asks how she could do such a thing, but Iri thanks her for being stupid enough to help her get this far. Then, she turns to Shizuku and tells her she intends to use her to take out Kaori. She grabs a sword, and just before she can plunge it into her, a barrier protects her and Iri gets knocked away while Kaori stands at the entrance, casting her spells, and Lily keeps up a barrier. A magic knight tries to attack from behind, but Hiyama shows up and takes him down. So Lily turns to him for help, but he knocks her out, stabs Kaori, and says he's finally got her. Kaori still manages to cast a spell that heals all the students and begins to heal herself too, but Hiyama thrusts the sword back into her, causing her light to go out. Now healed, Manoa breaks out of his restraints and goes to town with the Magic Knights, and the other students join in to help. But when he tries to attack Eri, Captain Meld stops him and he's forced to fight him. Suddenly, he begins to feel weak and vomits blood. Eri reveals that she slipped him some poison with that kiss, but it's not lethal as she prefers to end him with her own hands. Next, Eri turns to Kaori and begins to recite her soul-binding spell. But before she can complete it, Nagumo shows up and asks what the hell is going on. He teleports to Kaori's side, tossing Eri out of the way, then hands Kaori over to Tio and Eiko to work on. Eri says it's no use since she's already dead and tries to make a deal with him while a magic knight attacks him from behind. He shoots the knight's head off without turning around. Eri then sends Captain Meld after him, but Nagumo stops his sword with just 2 fingers. When he realizes Meld is begging him to put them out of their misery, he shoots him down, then whips out a machine gun and takes out the rest of the magic knights. When the dust settles, he puts the gun to Eri's head and asks for her last words, but before he can pull the trigger, a fireball comes at him, which he deflects, followed by Hiyama, who tries to attack while screaming at him. Nagumo slams him into the floor and tells him to shut his damn mouth. He holds him by the neck while Hiyama cries and blames him for everything. Then, he kicks his whiny out into the horde of monsters gathering around the building. Tio tells him they've been able to attach her soul but need help to go any further. Fred shows up and tells him to surrender since they're completely surrounded. Nagumo calmly summons a device that creates a huge energy blast, taking everything outside the walls out instantly. He then tells Fred to get out of his sight. Fred swears to get revenge for this disgraceful loss and leaves with Eri by his side. Meanwhile, Yu and Shi finally arrive, and they follow Tio to try and help Kaori as Nagumo assures Shizuku that they'll definitely bring her back. Some days later, Liliana reads a report explaining how Eri used her necromancy skills to control the female demon from the labyrinth and contact the demons to make a deal to access the kingdom in exchange for a Manoa. Also, the brainwashing and murder of the king were discovered to be the work of the nun who is currently missing. Liliana visits the tributes to the fallen. At the same time, the girls continue to work on Kaori, and Yu tells Nagumo that Eiko took a break and advises him to go to her. He finds her, and she confesses that she's sad that any of her students had to die, so he offers her his back to cry on. Later, Manoa and Shizuku finish sparring, and when Liliana checks in to see how they're doing, he tells her she's been waiting for Nagumo but doesn't fully trust him. Suddenly, Nagumo and the rest fall from the sky, and when Shizuku asks where Kaori is, he warns her that she looks a bit different. Kaori then lands in body, and Shizuku embraces her. When they ask what happened to her own body, she explains that she wanted to be stronger, so they repaired his body and put her soul inside, while her body is suspended in magic for when she chooses to go back. Shizuku thanks him for all his help and promises to do whatever it takes to pay him back after he tells them the truth about the god of this world, which upsets a Manoa, who intends to fight the god. But when Nagumo tells him he doesn't intend to fight for people he doesn't know, he tells a Manoa to become strong and protect them himself. Later, the group has dinner in the palace. The students come in to join them and ask where they're heading next. When he mentions the labyrinth he'd be going to, Liliana asks if she can tag along, as she'd like to go to the imperial capital to discuss with the emperor. He says he doesn't mind but has no intention of going to the capital. A Manoa suggests he goes along to protect her and asks him to show him how to get ancient magic so he can be stronger. After hearing this, all the students plan to follow along in hopes of getting stronger. He tells them they leave at dawn, which makes them excited. After the girls offer to feed Nagumo from their spoons, he decides to indulge them for once, causing Tio to get off from the spoon she used. Then she asks him to reward her for saving Eiko and tells him to stick his tool in her rear, just like he did the first time they met. This annoys him, so he decides to bring out his longer, harder tool and tells her to brace herself, but she tries to chicken out when she sees how large it is. The next morning, the group waits outside while the students and Liliana join up with them. They bid Eiko and the hero a reluctant goodbye. And that's where this video ends. Comment guys, which waifu you like the most, so watch the following video and I will see you in the next one.